And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Coachella Valley. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, on Sunday's Meet the Press, Gavin Newsom was asked if he has confidence in L.A. Mayor Karen Bass.
Do you have faith in Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass?
I have absolute faith in our community. I have faith in our leaders. I have the faith of our capacity to work together.
He didn't answer.
No, he didn't. He was also asked if the buck stops with him regarding no water being in the fire hydrants, and he said he's not the mayor of California.
He loves saying that one. Usually he says that one anytime he's got to go clean up something in Oakland.
I said, hell no, baby boy. Let me get up on out of here.
It seems like he's hedging his bet, so if this goes south, he can blame Karen Bass and say that he had nothing to do with it.
Well, the fact that she wasn't here for the first day and the fact that her response has been kind of a mess and the emergency alerts and the testiness with reporters, she's definitely being set up as the fall guy here.
Joining us to talk about this and much, much more is the professor of political science emeritus at California State University, Fullerton, Professor Barbara Stone. Welcome.
Hi, John.
So what do you make of Gavin Newsom not giving a full-throttle defense of Karen Bass? It looks like he's waiting to see how the jury weighs in.
Remember, when you deal with Governor Newsom, you are dealing with the future president of the United States, and he, of course, is not responsible for anything bad. So, of course, he has to keep all options open. And my Lord, John, she's an easy target because you talk about roaring incompetence. Gavin, I don't think a whole lot of Gavin. He's everything you guys say. But he certainly knows how to look for the person he can blame for everything he does wrong. Honey, her own fire chief is throwing her under the bus. That tells you something.
What do you make of that? Because I know I believe the fire chief was not appointed by Bass. I think the fire chief was appointed by Eric Garcetti, and I bet you anything his wife was the one that picked her. And if Eric Garcetti was the one that hired the fire chief, that means this fire chief doesn't owe her job to Karen Bass. Maybe she needs Karen Bass to keep her there or to reappoint her to stay as fire chief of Los Angeles. But it's not as if those two are longstanding political allies. What do you make of her willingness to go public and say, oh, no, they did cut my budget. They failed the fire department. They failed the people of L.A., and their budget cuts hindered our response to these fires? Because that's what she's saying.
Almost in words of one syllable. I did not know that. I hadn't bothered thinking through, but you're probably right on the Garcetti appointment. But more importantly, besides, hey, man, don't go blaming me. Gavin and I are out here. We're innocent. I will assume that she's telling the truth because supposedly there is a memo that does this. And the memo is not from February or from God knows when. The memo is from a month ago when she is telling the mayor that your budget cuts are impacting my readiness. And so she has her proof right there, and it strikes me, understanding we're talking about someone I don't know, that you could get there. This is not the person I owe anything. And I told her. I just told her. But she needed the money for the homeless. And then she flew off to Ghana. Once again, by the way, when they had told her before she left that you were going to have a big wind event in the city. I can see some combination of, sister, I told you this is on your head and I'm not taking the fall for it. And I must say, I don't blame the woman.
Because if Karen Bass doesn't take the blame, the fire chief will.
That's correct. No matter how you look at it, and we can talk about, well, the water. But people don't focus on water and power, although they certainly obviously didn't play a very positive role here. It's not easy to pin it on the governor, although President Trump's sure trying. And Bass just set herself up. Have you, I assume, have seen those clips that actually were Sky News when she was trying to get off the plane now that she's decided to come back, and he's asking her, don't you feel bad about what you did? How do you answer questions on this? Blah, blah, blah. And she just stands there looking like a zombie. Oh, my Lord, she set herself up then.
Let's talk about how people are going to react to this, specifically how liberal partisan Democrats, because when you're talking about voters in L.A., that's largely who you're talking about. How are they going to react to this? Because it seems like from Gavin's point of view, blaming it on Trump is good enough, and it probably is for him. And if you're Karen Bass, she seems to be blaming it on unprecedented winds and climate change. Now, we've seen some people on the left break with her on that. The owner of the Los Angeles Times, Patrick Soon-Shiong, came out this weekend and said that it was a mistake for his paper to endorse her, that competence matters. We've seen Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks and Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks break ranks with Karen Bass. But in my own personal social network, the liberal Democrats in Los Angeles I know seem to be buying what she's selling. They're now mad at quote-unquote climate change. But let's talk about that for a second, because let's just assume that their premise is correct, and climate change is responsible for the wind, and climate change is responsible for the dry conditions, and climate change is responsible for the spread of the fire. And this is something that concerns you greatly and has for some time. Wouldn't you have been spending your time preparing for a massive fire if you believe that global warming will produce one any day now? If I live in a neighborhood that I believe is becoming unsafe, I start taking proactive measures immediately. Maybe you put lights around your house. Maybe you put cameras around your house. Maybe you knock on the door of your neighbors and make sure that people are looking out for your house when you're not there. Maybe you buy a dog. Maybe you buy a gun. Maybe you buy a home defense system. Whatever the case may be, you start taking steps right away. The moment that you start feeling that your neighborhood is becoming unsafe, you start working on it immediately. If they believe that climate change is responsible for this and they were ahead of the curve on it, why weren't they doing anything about it before?
Okay, I'm making up everything I'm about to say, but I think I may easily be right. You need to divide the theys. And if by the theys you mean the true believer, environmentalist, ideologues, the ones who really do think water is better spent on the Delta smelt, even though they're already extinct in the wild, then in fact what you're dealing with is ideology, not reality. And so everything you just brought up is not relevant to those people, because the environment and climate change and all that for them is a tool to affect certain sorts of changes, more importantly, to establish control over society. And the fact a few houses burned down in, let's just say Altadena, which, by the way, is a rather heavily middle-class black district, they don't care. These are sacrifices in the name of the greater good. Now, hold that thought. If by they you mean the people who support those nutty ideologues, those are going to be what I've, from almost my entire life, referred to as limousine liberals. The kinds of people who it sounds so good, it sounds so loving, and I happen to live on the west side of Los Angeles where none of this garbage ever affects me. And you would think that those people would have had the intelligence to do something about it, But I honestly believe in the Palisades, it never crossed their mind that it could hit them. Sort of like crime, that belongs down in the ghetto. And I can love the criminals because they were abused, but they're never going to do anything to me. These are people who, frankly, have been what's been running L.A., since the days of Tom Bradley and his people getting together with the West Side Jewish community, and that's what runs Democrats in L.A. And I don't think, John, it ever occurred to them that this could happen to them. Now, go up the coast a little bit, and if you live in Malibu, you know you're going to burn down, right? So if you're going in there, you're taking risks and you're willing to do it. People who've rebuilt 2 and 3 and 4 times. But I think those people in the Palisades and surrounding just didn't believe it would happen to them. And even when you go a little further north, like they didn't get to Brentwood this time, I know in the 1960s, a whole lot of burning took place there. But that's 40, 50, 60 years ago? People have short memories. Yes, they should have done something. But that would require thinking intelligently, and it just never occurred to them.
Let's take it one step further. If climate change is the reason that this happened, okay, fine. Did climate change send those erroneous text messages to everyone telling them it was time to evacuate when in fact it was not? Did climate change forget to tell the fire department that the reservoir was empty due to maintenance? That, according to some reports, never even took place. They had that facility offline since February, and according to reporters who went to the site, there was no evidence of any construction going on there at all. So they drained it, and they didn't do anything with it in terms of the construction. Was it climate change that cut the budget of the fire department when the chief told them that those cuts would lead to a impotent response to a fire if one took place? How do you blame climate change for all of that?
Well, because they're casting about. That's easy enough. No, you have absolute incompetence. And in this case, I really do think it is overwhelming incompetence, bureaucratic inertia. As you just said, people who should have been worrying about it and thinking about it didn't. John, I have a hard time. It's very difficult for me as I look at the priorities of the Democratic left to understand a person of intelligence voting for that, because that's what you get when you vote Democrat in this state, particularly in L.A. In fact, if you want to get to it, the last election for mayor, Rick Caruso ran going, hey, she doesn't know how to do anything. I'm competent. Vote for me. And the Democratic Party went, well, you're not a real Democrat, so that's all we care about, so vote for her. Well, they got what they were going to get. But it'll be interesting because it strikes me as possible that what may happen if there are some live brains in that area, that it will occur to them and look what you just said. If it's all climate change, then why aren't we doing something to prepare for it? But of course, well, just leave it at that. That comes out of an environmental community which is willing to take steps to, they don't think, I wish I could think of a better way of this, by we're going to preserve the forest, so no more burning, no more clearing, no more logging, no more anything, so then it can all burn down at once, right? But that somehow they just never put stuff together that what they're doing will in fact end up in environmental degradation, not even talking about people. And we just have, I don't know, John, I can't explain it, but that's where they come from. And the people whose houses in the Palisades just burned down, many of them believed it.
When you look at your mail and you look at the TV ads when we have local elections in California, the Democratic Party, and they've been quite successful at winning elections doing this, but they nationalize virtually every election. You can go back to Gray Davis running against Dan Lundgren on the subject of abortion, as if the governor of California has any say over what the Supreme Court does. But Gray Davis beat him like a drum. I think he beat Dan Lundgren by like 20 points after Republicans had held that seat for something like 16 years with George Dumajan and Pete Wilson. But every election has turned into that in California. They run on abortion. They run on how much they hate Donald Trump. And it's not just for governor. It's for mayor. It's for city council, water board elections, city council elections. They're all based on what your position on Gaza is. Things that have nothing to do with anything. And I think to a certain degree, the first crop of people who started doing that did it because their consultants told them it would help them win the election, and it did. And I think over time, what we're ending up with are politicians and candidates who only care about those subjects. They don't care about anything at the state and local level. And if you have no interest in any of those subjects, why would you waste your time reading about it? Why would you waste your time getting to know it? Why would you waste your time meeting with people who work in those fields and proactively trying to solve problems? That's just something that's not relevant to you. And I think that by nationalizing our elections, we pretty much have those types of people in elected office across the board.
Well, and if you want a scary thought going forward, I may be wrong, John, but I honestly believe you will find that Karen Bass will not be reelected mayor of Los Angeles. I know you're right, and they're making excuses, but I think there's too much there for someone to pin. Okay, let's use a comparable place, which would be the city of Chicago, where they decided for a variety of reasons, and in their case I think it was crime and people just couldn't escape it, that Lori Lightfoot was incompetent and had to go, and they voted her out. The problem is, going back to our root causes, that the problem is that so far the voters of the city will vote only Democrat. The Democrat Party statewide and even more in LA County is dominated by the left. And what you're going to get if somebody doesn't do some kind of creative thinking is you're going to do what Chicago did, and yeah, you're going to get rid of her, and you're going to get somebody worse. Just go look at that LA City Council that you talk about, and there are people there who are worse. And in the case of Chicago, they went for somebody who was a total creature of the teachers' unions like your friends at UTLA, organized, and yeah, they got rid of an incompetent and replaced it with something worse, to be repetitious. So, oh dear Lord, my husband and I were very careful over the years never to own property in the city of Los Angeles, and I want to show you how smart we were.
All right, well, let's talk about this in terms of the future of California. In this last election, the state of California moved farther to the right than any other state in the union, and we specifically saw serious movement among Latino voters. What we just talked about, I think, accurately describes where college-educated, white-collar, liberal Democrats are. But if you're a blue-collar Latino who is used to voting for the Democratic Party, these people are slitting your throat on a day-to-day basis, and it's just getting worse. How do they keep that person voting for their coalition?
They don't know. How's that? This is my current thought. I've thought about it, and of course I may be wrong, but my thought is they don't know. Now, having said that, I know what they think. You did notice that while we were facing Southern California burning up, Gavin and the legislature devoted $50 billion to fighting Trump, right? But you need to look at what that 50 million was for. 25 of it goes to the State Department of Justice, I think, and maybe local people to sue the federal government. But the rest of it, half of it, goes to, they say to helping illegal immigrants, but they don't ever use that term, fight federal deportation when Trump becomes president. But what I've read is what that is all that money is going to select nonprofits who fight for immigrants. I think, John, that besides who gives money to whom, that tells you that they think the answer to gaining the Latino vote is to stand up for illegal immigrants whom the evil Donald Trump is trying to deport, which brings you back to your nationalization of issues. The problem is, for them, I think, but I may be misreading it, is that your normal blue-collar Hispanic working person in this state is not terribly sympathetic to those folks. And in my limited experience, it's not even related to how their ancestors may have come across the border. They're here, they're hardworking, and they don't want to be overwhelmed by this. And you can imagine what's going on. But I think that the Democrats' answer, at least right now, to getting those voters back is to stand up for illegals. And I think that's probably a pretty bad policy, but we're going to find out.
Last question before you go. If you are the Trump administration, you're certainly looking at a lot of people that you will be inheriting who have been displaced from their homes, children who have no schools to go to, infrastructure that has been damaged, a community that right now is hoping to hang on to their insurance. Who knows if the insurance companies will be around to pay out these claims. If you're Donald Trump, clearly you have to do something about this. However, typically what they do is they just write checks and they give money to the local people, and the local people spend it where it's needed. You can't do that here. I would not trust Karen Bass with a nickel. I would not trust Gavin Newsom with a nickel. If you give them money for the fire victims, the money's going to go to illegal aliens and transgendered story hour and all of these different things that they're going to twist around into somehow being related to the fire. And none of that money is going to go to the actual people in need. And then that's going to turn into a big scandal. What do you do if you're Donald Trump, if you want to actually help the people who have been victimized by this fire and not give money to the electeds who will squander it away on their allies?
Well, obviously the president hasn't asked me yet, but, one of the things here, John, is that you sort of begin with, will Trump have any basis for making decisions on? How's that? Other than California doesn't vote for him, but he did much better in the state and he knows it. This is an area that actually, believe it or not, at one level Trump has paid attention to. I don't know if you recall, in his first term, he was at war over the Delta smelt and diverting water to farmers and doing all of that. And he and Gavin had a war over it. So he's aware of what goes on here. He's aware of probably some of the stuff that needs to be done. And I cannot imagine him appointing anybody who is going to roar in and go, oh, let's just give Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass money. I suppose it could happen, but I don't think so. And he does indeed have people, and the advantage to this administration is he has people in mind this time who have an idea of what they're doing. He has an idea of what the challenges here are. And you ask, what specific would I recommend? Oh, let's start with what FEMA can do, but you keep control of what FEMA does. you don't let them give it to the locals. And you do some stuff like that. But it requires people who really understand. And I think he's going to come much closer on this than people are thinking.
Professor Barbara Stone, Professor of Political Science Emeritus at California State University at Fullerton. Thank you so much for stopping by.
It was a challenge, John, but worthwhile. Thank you.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
You must be a glutton for punishment, but hey, do whatever you feel like. Go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts. You can listen to the podcast Stone Cold Sober. You can listen to the podcast Drunk. You can listen to the podcast with a needle sticking out of your arm.
I love heroin.
And Randy, we're moving down the dial in the San Francisco Bay.
At night, we do a version of the Fixed California Hour for our sister station, KSFO. It airs at 11 o'clock weeknights. Here's why that's important to you. KSFO has moved to a larger signal. They're on AM 810 now. That signal goes all the way through Northern California. And at night, when other stations power down, you can hear that station across state lines, even in Canada. But most importantly for you, it comes in crystal clear in Southern California. So you've got a preset for 790. It's probably in spot 1 because you're a P1. That's what they call that. Spot 2, yeah, sure, KFI, whatever. Spot 3, AM 810.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
790 KABC welcomes Flogging Molly to the Hollywood Palladium. Love that venue. On March 17th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com, but right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-795-2222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Live Nation. Good luck dialing.
Right now, we're going through the sound of California Governor Gavin Newsom on with Fox 11's Alex Michelson.
And Alex asked Gavin about the executive order he put out on Friday ordering an investigation into what happened with the DWP and that reservoir that was offline and the fact that the fire hydrants could not get water.
You put out a letter to DWP asking, how is it that there was...
By the way, the head of the DWP makes more than Gavin.
But does she make more than the fake doctor?
Yes. She makes $750K.
Uh-oh. Can you imagine if they promoted the fake doctor and put her in charge of the DWP?
Next slide.
Asking, how is it that there was no water to fight this fire in certain places? We were here, and basically these places just burned, and there was nothing that could be done. Yeah. Does the state have any responsibility in that? Is there more the state can do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, that's what I did. That's what the letter's about. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's be transparent. Let's move this forward quickly. DWP and the city and the oversight as it relates to the Met, and we want to make sure that all that information is made real time and in public. I'm not interested in the finger point. I want to know what the hell happened, and would it have mattered? I mean, let's be honest about it here. Mm-hmm. I've talked to all my experts, all the firefighters I've been with. They said we could add an engine on every house in 90-mile-an-hour winds with all the pressure in the world. So you got to.
I don't like the answer. We got to throw our hands up. This was just so devastating. There's nothing we could have done.
Yes, because now he's kind of moving into Karen Bass territory.
So you got to be realistic about that as well, but still doesn't make it right. And I want to know when went wrong so it doesn't happen again.
But when you saw those images, I mean, that outraged so many folks.
I didn't see the images. I was there.
Right.
I was right on the line. I was here within a couple hours of the.
You notice he has to make everything about himself?
That's just how he operates. He can't help it. He's a narcissist.
Of the incident. So we saw it firsthand. We were getting the feedback in real time. Yeah, I mean, look, these systems obviously were not designed for a catastrophic event of this scale and magnitude. So the question is, they need to be designed in this new world reality, where we're in the middle of January, it's 70 degrees out. You get hurricane force winds up to 100 miles an hour, extended over a period of time. That's reality. So you got to prepare for that new reality. There's a deviation of normalcy now as it relates to what's happened with this climate, and we've got to own up to that.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Frank writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. John and Randy, I'm sure you've heard the LAFD chief said she didn't know the Palisades Reservoir was empty because LAFD and LADWP don't communicate. Isn't this a dereliction of duty? How can this even be possible?
No kidding. And I know at one point Biden made the allegation that they didn't have access to water because the power was shut off. Well, if you're in Riverside County, there's one company that you buy your water from, one company you buy your power from. In L.A., it's all under the same roof, and it's all owned and regulated by the city. It's a city municipally owned utility. So that wouldn't make any sense. If you'd like to weigh in, you can give us a call at 800-222-5222. Let's begin with Scott in Rancho Santa Margarita. Scott, hello.
Hi, John. Thanks for taking my call. I guess I'd like to put some clarity on this whole situation and actually probably would put to rest the news media, everybody on this thing, okay? When you design a water system, I've done it for 30 years, a water system designed to fight a 4-hour fire with a certain flow rate, 2,000 gallons per minute. It's a localized fire. That's 3 fire hydrants, okay? The storage in the reservoirs for 4 hours. 4 hours, okay? What happens in your house when someone downstairs opens up a tap and you're taking a shower? The pressure goes down, correct? That means that no water system anywhere in this entire United States can fight a brush fire of that magnitude. The hydrants went empty because the water storage in that pressure zone is designed for a 4-hour fire. Everybody needs to listen to this. At 2,000 gallons per minute. 70-mile-per-hour winds, lack of airplanes initially. This is a natural disaster, period. Everybody needs to stop talking about this. Everyone needs to talk to an expert like me, a water agency expert. And they're not. I don't know why they're not doing it yet, but they should, okay? There was water. Ask anybody. Before that fire happened, were people complaining about no water coming out of their taps? No, they were not. The system is designed properly. The reason water reservoirs are taken out, it's during the rainy season. They did not realize this was unusual. The wind would hit. They always leave reservoirs running enough fires. They had other reservoirs online because they had water before the fire. Nobody in that residence said they didn't have water. I would say if you knew the first fire hydrant that was open, they had water. The second, they had water. The third, they had water. The fourth started going dry, okay? Now, after this conversation, also, power systems are not like water systems. Water systems are on separate pressure zones, okay, specifically. You cannot move water around without massive pumps. It's all based on gravity. I'm stating this again. 4-hour fire, a small build complex, 4 hours, 2,000 gallons per minute. Do the math. You can figure out the 1 million gallons of fire storage in a reservoir to fight a fire. These systems will never, ever be designed to fight a fire like that. Gavin Newsom has changed strategy. It will not happen. This is a natural disaster happening once every 50 or 100 years. That's the end of my call. Get this out to the nation, and everybody can be quiet. Okay? Thank you.
Good Lord. I'm an expert. You listen to me. I'm the only one that has the answers, and this is the way it is.
You know, sometimes people call this show and the audience thinks maybe they started drinking early. This is the case of somebody who should start drinking early. Take the edge off, buddy.
Boy, I feel like we're back in COVID. Isn't that the attitude that they had during COVID?
I do love the, if everyone would just listen to me. Okay, buddy.
That reservoir, by the way, was offline since February. And according to reporters who were there, who were looking at that reservoir, no construction was going on. There were no trucks there. There were no people there. I get it. If there's a fire, you're going to abandon the construction project, but your stuff would still be there. And according to people who live in that area, there's been no activity going on there for quite some time.
If it was as straightforward as the caller explained, we wouldn't need an investigation to figure out what the hell happened, because everyone's getting a different answer on what happened.
No. Gavin Newsom is the one who said that the locals could not give him a straight story.
And then Biden got a different story than them.
Yes. If it's such a simple explanation as to why it happened, why wouldn't there be one explanation, and why wouldn't that be the explanation that takes to the powers that be?
Well, John,
why would you have to tell all of these different stories to all of these different people? And he said it was the same people telling him different stories.
Now, John, how exactly should I go about taking that call and, as he said, get out to the nation?
I don't know, but he seemed really upset. So if you don't do it fast enough, he might be mad at you.
It's been a fun day for calls.
What are you going to do?